And again, for participants, if you have questions, could you please use the question and answer chat window? We will be looking to those windows to see your questions and then answer them. So without further ado, Madam Chair, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hospitality Newfoundland Labrador's webinar, Inflation Proofing Your Business. My name is Brenda O'Reilly, and I'm the chair of Hospitality Newfoundland Labrador. And in my private life, I own O'Reilly's Irish Newfoundland Pub and Yellow Belly Brewery and Public House and Yellow Belly at the airport. We are very pleased that you could all join us today, and we're looking forward to a great discussion. Of course, just as Craig mentioned, use the chat window and the Q&A box throughout so we can monitor some questions. I also want to respectfully acknowledge the province of Newfoundland Labrador as the ancestral homelands of many diverse populations of Indigenous people who have contributed to 9,000 years of history, including the Beothuk on the island of Newfoundland. Today, this province is home to diverse populations of Indigenous and other people. We also acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit. Today, June the 21st, is National Indigenous Peoples Day. This is a day for all Canadians to recognize and celebrate the unique heritage, diverse cultures, and outstanding contributions of First Nations, Innu, and the Métis people. The Canadian Constitution recognizes these three groups as Aboriginal peoples, also known as Indigenous peoples. Although these groups share many similarities, they each have their own distinct heritage, language, cultural practices, and spiritual beliefs. In cooperation with Indigenous organizations, the Government of Canada chose June 21st, the summer solstice, for National Aboriginal Day, now known as National Indigenous People Day. For generations, many Indigenous peoples and communities have celebrated their culture and heritage on or near this day due to the significance of the summer solstice as the longest day of the year. I'm very happy to be here today. This is an extremely important topic that concerns all tourism operators. After 2 years of lockdowns, we are now faced with a drastic increase in inflation. The cost of goods sold and services have skyrocketed, which is leaving us feeling the crunch. During this webinar, we will hear from tourism operators and a financial expert on how to effectively manage inflation. We're very happy to have Mike Ball with us today. Mike is a small business NL area manager with the Business Development Bank of Canada. Mike has been helping small and medium-sized business owners scale up their businesses for nearly 20 years through financial and advisory support. Mike's experience and insights in this area will be of great benefit to our discussion today. To get an industry perspective, we have invited some tourism operators to share their experiences and best practices. With us today is Todd Perrin. Todd developed a national profile as a chef through appearances in the 2011 season of Top Chef Canada. 2 years later, he opened Mallard Cottage and is the owner and chef. Since opening Mallard Cottage, Todd expanded and added 2 guest houses built with a traditional Newfoundland look and opened Water West Kitchen and Meats in 2019. The business has a butcher shop downstairs and a cafe and restaurant above it. Altogether, those businesses employ approximately 60 staff. We also have Judys Perspective with us. Judy is well known in the Newfoundland Labrador tourism industry with over 25 years of experience. In her current role as managing director, she takes an active role in the growth and development of Clayton Hospitality's award-winning properties. In 1998 to 2010, Judy was the president of Maxim Vacations and helped grow it to become Newfoundland Labrador's largest tour wholesaler and one of Atlantic Canada's leading travel providers. This growth took place amidst the worst external influences the industry had ever seen at that time, which should prove beneficial for our discussion today. So without further ado, to get the discussion started, I'm going to pass it over to Mike.
Thank you, Brenda. And thank you to Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador. You folks have always been the leading edge of needs of your membership, and I know this is a very important topic to your members, particularly as we begin what we all expect to be a very busy tourism season. And I'll provide basically an overview of some economic data along with some strategies on how to combat inflation, but I also want to move to the panel discussion and also hear from Judy and Todd, because as industry experts, their opinions are very valuable. So without further ado, I'll share my screen. And if someone can just give me a quick comment in the chat to confirm that you can see the screen, or maybe panelists can give me a thumbs up. Can someone see that? All good. Okay, great. So we'll move through. Bear with me here now. All right. There we go. So I want to just give a bit of an overview on the current economic environment. And as was already stated, inflation rate is quite high in Canada right now. And in recent history, it's significantly higher, as you can see from that bar graph. And, you know, just to provide a little bit of background, inflation generally can be attributed to an overheated set of economic conditions. Essentially, we've got money flowing in the economy at a greater rate than the economy's ability to produce goods and services right now. And it's particularly driven by some demand and supply side factors right now. We know there's been some pent up demand coming out of the COVID lockdown period. We've got, you know, some historically low interest rates. And also, there's been quite a bit of COVID stimulus on the demand side that's helped support the economy through the COVID period. And on the supply side, we know that there are quite a number of supply chain issues that pretty much every industry has been facing, and there are quite a few labor challenges, which are kind of the factors that lead into to the condition of inflation right now. Historically, we are quite high, but it has been higher in you know, about, I guess, 30 years ago or so, maybe closer to 40 years now, I guess, when we had the spikes back then. But, you know, just show this to show the silver lining that that we will get to the other side of the current inflation period that we're in. So no surprise around supply chain issues. I think really the biggest factor here is that there's been international lockdowns that have impacted production, and that's regardless of whatever industry you're involved with. Those do filter down through the economy in every industry. And we know that there's been a labor shortage for quite some time. This is not unique to COVID. This was actually in place, of course, pre-COVID, and it was accelerated through the COVID period. There are a number of issues that came together to make for this. We know our demographics are such that we have an older population with fewer workers. There's been less in terms of international support for labor, and that hopefully will improve in the near term. And also we know, and I'm sure all members would know, the impacts of COVID lockdowns or COVID cases, I should say, and people having to isolate and how that impacts the day-to-day operations. And I guess this comes as no surprise as well that we will see further interest rate increases. We did see another 0.5 increase as of June 1st, and another increase now is expected in July. And of course, the interest rates are the primary tool that the Bank of Canada will use to combat inflation. And there's a healthy amount of inflation, and then there's a little bit too hot of a level of inflation, and that's kind of the condition that we're faced with right now. And you'll see here, historically, the Bank of Canada still does have room to maneuver to correct inflation, and they've made that their top priority to get inflation back in line throughout this year. And if you look at, I wanted to provide some silver lining, and I don't think this will come as much of a surprise with the pent-up demand that's been there for travel, tourism, hospitality. That pent-up demand is starting to bear itself out in the economic data. And these numbers are for the coming through the winter and spring. But that hockey stick growth, that's what we're seeing in the hospitality industry, which is fantastic to see. And all indications are that we're going to have a banner year, and quite likely a record year across the board in the hospitality industry, which is welcome relief after the couple of years that have been heavily hitting heavily hit the tourism and hospitality sector, of course. So moving into a few strategies, and I'll also finish with something tangible that'll be a benefit to all the members. There is a new program with some direct support that's available for companies that are looking to address the impacts of inflation. So first things first, put your financials at the center of your decision making. Now more than ever, there's a need to understand your financials in real time, particularly to be able to track your numbers and to be able to track your costing. Sales will quite likely rise across the board for all industries, given the growth that we're seeing in the tourism sector, and then also the need to raise wages, or not wages, well, wages, yes, but prices on account of higher operating costs. But the point being that it's all in vain unless you have a good handle on your margins and are watching that in real time. So quite likely for some operators, that might mean that you need to increase your financial acumen and begin by working with your accountant, working with industry partners like BDC, like Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador, to make sure that you've got a good understanding on your current financial position and are using that financial data daily. And when we talk about putting the financials at the center of your decision making, it's about real-time understanding of your data and being able to track that on a daily basis. So setting up financial dashboards so you can understand not just your sales trends, but what's happening on your margins, so you can understand those variable costs and how they're changing, so you can respond quickly with making the pricing adjustments that you need to, and if necessary, adding surcharges to your pricing model to make sure that you're accounting for things like the additional transportation costs, the additional higher cost of your inputs. And those things are not able to be set and left throughout a season. The situation is much more dynamic, as I'm sure a lot of you folks can appreciate. As you see the cost of your inputs, you really need to be able to watch that and be able to adjust in real time. Now, when it comes to the particulars of how the hospitality sector and how the food service sector are adjusting to these challenges, I'll let our industry experts speak a little bit more particularly to those strategies. But the key thing here is that you need to understand your financial data and make sure that it's rooted in real time so you can respond quickly to the rapid changes that we're seeing. Point number two, and it ties into the first, and that's around growing your network of trusted advisors. I think through the COVID period, we've realized now more than ever how interconnected the economics of all of our businesses are. And no business can operate in a silo. And traditionally, we have lagged other countries in terms of productivity, also in terms of technology adoption. And we now see how connected we are and how rapidly a situation can change in terms around the cost of inputs and the scarcity of things like labor. So we need to make sure that we have a knowledge of the supports that are available and that you expand beyond a single operator to having a group of trusted advisors. And that applies to every size of business. You get to larger businesses that'll have an executive team and maybe more sophisticated structures and have those inputs and voices. And that's great. For small operators, you also need to have those voices at the table as well, and know that no one is an island. We all need to have those supports, be it your accountant, be it your banker. It's important now more than ever to rely upon the support of external consultants, and I think particularly around HR challenges. And there are great HR professionals that can help with recruitment efforts and with the attraction of international employees, as well as there are certainly labor needs that are only going to become more challenging as time passes. The labor challenge in particular is one that's not going to go away overnight. It's been here for a long time, and it's only going to continue and quite likely become more challenging into the future. So strategy, particularly around your HR, with the support of external professionals, is needed now more than ever. So I'll quickly move through, just bear with me here now, to the last strategy. And we recently did a study the BDC did a national study to assess the technology adoption of business owners across the country, and most are making investments in technology with an average investment of $118,000. Having said that, only 5% are what we would call to be digitally advanced, and those that are making the highest levels of investments in technology are seeing that rapid growth. That 81% are more likely to have that kind of hockey stick growth when they make those heavy investments in technology. And those that don't are seeing stagnation or decline. And technology really is the X factor that can help offset the impacts of inflationary pressures. So we find ways to do processes in a more standardized, cost-effective way, and it can alleviate challenges when it comes to labor shortages as well. I'll make these slides available to you, but when we talk about examples of digital technologies, it could quite likely be the customer-facing things like your website presence, the way that you interact with customers, and how you manage your sales. On the back office side of things, it could be things like your accounting system, the way that you do your invoicing, and how you store your data, be it virtually, like in a cloud, for example, right? So I want to introduce, and this is the tangible takeaway that I want to leave with you today. The Canada Digital Adoption Plan is a new program that was only launched a couple of months ago as a partnership between BDC and the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. And I'll cut right to the chase. So basically, there are two streams that are available here. There are grants available for you to work with a consultant to be able to develop a technology plan. So those technology plan is going to be unique to your business operation. So you can work with a professional to be able to identify what technologies can make your operation as efficient as possible. And then on the back end of that, we've got interest-free money that's available for the adoption of those technologies. You'll see two streams, and not to get too granular, but just so you're aware, the main program is called Stream 2, which is for companies with revenues of 500,000 or more. That's where you have that grant of up to 15,000 and an interest-free loan of up to 100,000. And for companies that are smaller than that, there still are funds available through digital advisors that can help you ramp up your online presence. In that Stream 2, with the 15,000 grant, up to 100,000 in interest-free loans, there are also funds available for work placements for recent graduates to help you with the deployment of technology. So some real tangible takeaways. It's a 4-year program that BDC is delivering with the federal government. So that's it from me. I'll also provide the particulars to Craig and Juanita, so we can make them available if you have any questions or anything on that particular program or anything else I talked about today. And my contact information is up there. So I will stop sharing my screen and I will turn it back to you, Brenda.
Thank you, Michael. So now I'd like to turn the mic over to Judy so she can introduce herself and give everyone an idea how her and her company are dealing with inflation. Judy?
Thanks so much, Brenda, and thank you, Mike, as well for sharing your perspectives on what we as business owners need to do. As Brenda mentioned in the introduction, for however many moons I own Maxim Vacations, and through that time, we did go through, SARS, Mad Cow, merger, strikes and acquisitions with the airlines, in addition then to the events of 9/11. So, I think it probably prepared me at some level for a pandemic, and who would have ever known that we'd be dealing with this and still dealing with it, 26 months, 27 months later. So, we own and operate the Comfort Hotel St. John's, the Comfort Inn Gander, and the Quality Hotel in Clarenville, with a staff of, pre-pandemic of about 115. We're probably just a little less than that now. And I guess very, very luckily for us, we had actually decided and sort of carved out our strategy before before the pandemic hit. So we sort of had our playbook. Now, as much as we had a playbook, a lot has changed over the course of the last little while. But what it did was it really forced us to look at what's most important in our company. And although, as Mike said, finances are, at the center of your decision making, we developed, I guess, our own path to profitability, which was really, really designed around our people, and that being our guests and our staff, our assets, and maintaining our buildings to ensure that they were, as tight as they could be, given the circumstances. And then in a time when things are out of control, to look for ways that we could control what we could. So it was a really granular, line by line exploration and understanding as to exactly where we sat with everyone. It was a matter of canceling contracts, renegotiating contracts, looking for energy efficiency programs, cross-training. It was everything from scheduled shuttle departures rather than on demand to, obviously housekeeping has been one of the big resets in the industry, which we can talk probably a little bit about later. But we also became very sales driven and sales focused because people were traveling. And although there was a lot of judgment around traveling, there were people that had to travel for any number of reasons. And, our food and beverage operations were played a big role in our success through that, and that we were able to provide meals, whether they be in room or in the restaurant, and the odd dates that it was available. And I guess we just really had to learn to be adaptable and flexible and really question everything that we had done in the past. And I think we're continuing to do that. There's not a day or a week that goes by that there isn't an invoice questioned. Why are we still spending $86 a month on Yellow Pages? And I will assure you that every bill that's paid actually comes under my nose. And it provides an opportunity then to understand, why are we paying so much more for this program in one jurisdiction and it's so much more efficient in another, looking at the fuel charges increasing, looking at the cost of goods. All of those things, I guess, enable us to question. And then the resulting factor of that is you adjust, menu engineering or re-engineering, and relearning the industry because things have changed in our business. I always joke and say, since we sold Maxim and I became immersed back in the hotel business, I've learned it now, I think, for the fourth time, because our industry is changing. Consumer demands are changing. Our staff have different expectations and different needs as well. And everything is sort of layered up and layered down. Clients need more, so the front line is required to do more, requires more support from management. And from an ownership perspective, we have a different role as well in supporting our teams and doing things to take care of people. Resilience is not infinite. And although we've all been tested, if you've made it this far, God bless you, but we still have a journey ahead. One of the things that I wanted to bring out today was the difference between tourism and travel. And I know that we often, look at this industry as the tourism industry, but the travel component of our business is very significant for a company like mine. 90, 120 days a year is not the path to profitability. Our path to profitability includes businesses traveling again. It includes, all service companies being able to move and travel, not because of COVID restrictions, but feeling safe and having the need to get back to whether it's meetings, conventions, or business travel. So I think one thing I did learn through all the turmoil in my Maxim days is that people are entitled to travel. People have that feeling of entitlement, and people will start to travel again. We're seeing it in Newfoundland. I think we're probably going to be one of the strongest provinces, certainly from a tourism standpoint this summer, and that we are projecting, I think, 1.6 million room nights through 2022, which is our, back to our 2019 numbers, whereas nationally we're looking to 2025 before we see that reset. So, lots of things to share over the course of time, but, we have just been all in. It has been, I can't say survival, but it's been a very strategic process, and processes and systems have actually really been important to our business as well, because it gives us that understanding and that data to make some of the decisions that we've had to make. So I'll wrap it up there, because I think there's probably going to be lots of questions and answers, but that'll give you an overview as to what we've been doing in the last little while. So Brenda, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Judy. Doing nothing apparently. I mean,
Sitting around with my in my ass.
thank you for that. I'm now going to pass it over to Todd, and of course he can introduce himself and tell us what they're doing at Mallard and Water West.
Thanks, Brenda, and thanks, Judy and Michael, for your presentations there. I mean, I'll repeat some of the things that Michael and both Judy said. I mean, it's I think Michael hit something there in terms of getting deep into the financial end of your business. Anybody that knows me knows that that's not really where I come from. I'm the guy who likes to sit out by the fire, and I like to talk about, very romantically about the business that I'm in, because it's very personal and close to my heart. It is for all of us. But I wear my business on my sleeve. It's always been what I feel is what makes me successful as a business person. But I come to learn very early on in the pandemic that nobody else cares about that, especially the banks and other people. So understanding the financial end of the businesses that I operate and run was a thing that I had to do in a very quick and frantic way in the beginning, to be honest, because it just was not our focus. We've always been someone who believed that we do something good, it'll work out. But we never factored a pandemic into that. We're talking inflation in this webinar, but I mean, really, we're talking about the pandemic and the long-lasting effects of that, and what it's done to the industry at large, and what it's done to industries across the world. I mean, I think that one good thing that we did inside of our businesses was that very, very early on, even with all the turmoil and the difficulties, we determined that we were not going to try to nibble away at the edges. We were trying to get as quickly as we could to what our business was going to be post-pandemic, whenever that was going to be. A year, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years. I fully believed and still believe that the world has fundamentally changed, the industry has fundamentally changed, and the sooner you're able to figure out where you fit in that, kind of when it all all the dust settles, will be maybe the only path to success. I think there's a danger out there that people are sitting around and just kind of throw everything in neutral and just waiting for everything to end, and then they're just going to open their doors and go back to doing things the way they were before. And I think that that's a massive mistake for anybody who's thinking about that. So our businesses, all three of them, have fundamentally changed in almost every way. The only similarity really is that we still provide the services that we provide. We still serve food. We still, we have a small inn with 7 rooms. We still give people a night's accommodation. We still serve wine and beer and coffee. But everything else, in terms of how we deliver it, how we pay people who deliver it, how we price what we do, every single thing around our businesses and what we deliver has changed. We decided that we were chasing the volume business too much, and we decided that it was important for us to get to a model where we delivered a higher quality at a higher price point and dealt with less people. And there was a lot of reasons behind that. And I could probably have a whole webinar to talk about why we went that direction. But, I think that COVID was what pushed us that way, because we realized that we were, for Mallard Cottage has been around for 9 years. It's a small little building down there in the corner of St. John's Kitty Vitty Village, but the amount of volume of people that push through that village and that restaurant it staggers me even to this day. But we got to the point where we were just pushing people through the restaurant and we weren't making any money. And everyone was working like a dog and everyone was slaving away, and we were doing something that was reasonably good, but we were just a break-even business for years. So we looked at COVID and what was coming out as an opportunity to dig deeply into what we're doing and decide if we wanted to be a place that just served as many people as possible, or a place that served people who really had the ability to appreciate what we were doing at a high level and deliver the amount of money at the end of the experience that allowed us to prosper and exist. So, you know, I believe that the market has fundamentally changed. I think that we'll through the rest of this conversation, we'll probably talk a little bit about what that might look like. But, you know, we're, as Judy said, and as Michael said, you know, we're looking like we're in for a banner year top line. I think everybody's kind of revenues are going to be as strong as they've ever been in 2022. That's the way it looks for us. Obviously, the bottom line number has changed because things have gotten significantly more expensive, labor not being the least of them. But I think that what we're looking at is a shift in the market, and that we just, you know, there are always going to be people who are going to travel, and there are always going to be people who want to go to restaurants and bars and stay in hotels and all that kind of thing. But given the change in how money flows around this world now, post-pandemic, and who has money and who doesn't, and what people are going to realize what their own personal financial situation is, you know, a year post lockdowns and all that stuff. I think that the tourism travel market is going to be fundamentally different 6 months from now than it even is today. So I think that trying to get your head around what, where and how your business fits in to what is going to be a different and new model going forward. I think the sooner that you know, folks get to that, the better. And that, you know, that's an ongoing process for us as we get back to, as I say every day, we've traded in COVID problems for regular restaurant problems. They're both equally challenging in ways. But you know, while we're dealing with regular restaurant problems, we're also trying to make sure that we are going to be positioned to deal with what our market and what our business looks like next month and 6 months from now. Because as Judy said, and as Michael said, I think that's going to be an evolving, a moving target for a long time. So I'll leave it at that, and look forward to delving deeper.
Thank you, Todd. And I mean, Todd and Judy said so many things there that I wrote. I have a list of questions, but I wrote a bunch down, and people please use the Q&A box or the chat box there, and we'll monitor them as well. But having to do more with less is a very important piece of that. But the other thing too is, like, you never, you know, in a crisis comes an opportunity. And, you know, the industry overall was, you know, the pandemic showed how vulnerable we really are as an industry. And, you know, some parts of some sectors of the industry, I can speak for food and beverage personally because I live it every day, and, you know, many of us do, but, you know, a lot of things that we were doing were broken. And so now, like Judy and Todd, you reflect on your business and you look at, okay, well, what can I do different to make this better and to change things? And technology, as Mike alluded to, you know, is a big piece of it. We pivoted quickly to technology. There is way more pivoting to do. You know, we have concentrated on technology in my companies, but the big opportunity now with menus, like I'm dealing with, as all of us are, I mean, cod. You know, cod, a staple here in Newfoundland, right? It went up 40% in the last 2 months. I don't know if people realize that cod has gone up by so much, but, you know, you got to be, you can't suck that up. I mean, you're going to find yourself, you know, short, and you're going to go, what happened? And so you got to really pay attention to your inputs, to all your costs, and you really got to be watching, and you got to invest in the right people to help you watch that, because if you get behind the 8 ball, you're screwed. I mean, you really are, right? But QR codes for your menus, there is a good technology piece, because people are used to technology. You'll have to have some printed ones for some, you know, people who are not tech savvy. But if you do use QR codes, you can be really flexible on your menus with your pricing, and it can be really current. And so QR codes are one of my suggestions that I wanted to pass on to people. But so I'm going to ask some questions now to our panelists. So so based on what you're seeing, you know, right now, I mean, prices are going up more and more every day. Of course, our bottom line is shrinking, and it was always shrinking. But now with the overhead costs going up, besides labor costs and the input costs going up, overhead costs, you know, fuel costs and utilities and the like are going up. So how do you, you know, price your menus? How do you price your products based on, you know, what you're seeing coming? Like, you know, what is the process? How do you sit down and do that? Judy?
So I registered for a webinar with an international group a while ago, and there was a pricing expert on there. And this is, I'm going to say it was February probably. And his comment was, if you haven't raised your prices 4 times since the start of the pandemic, you're already 20% behind. So, it becomes very, very granular, and it's not just setting prices, but it's also taking it down a level. So you ensure your servers know, where the best yield is, so that whether it's onion rings or whether it's a house-made dessert or whatever it is, if you're looking at upselling, it's one of those things where you're putting your Newfoundland Power bill on the staff bulletin board, so they understand that you've actually paid $24,000 for heat and light this week. So when I'm strolling through the corridors and the heat's on panic, they understand. So I think we've actually built the financial literacy of our group as well, and they understand that every room night matters and every sale matters. And I think that has been probably the biggest thing. I mean, one of the things that we learned about, and as we were sort of digging through our data, is that 30% of our revenue in the hotel sector was actually rolling in on the day for the day. So it really does change your pricing strategy. It's very, very different all of a sudden. When you start attaching a value to breakfast inclusive rooms, it's a very, very different, value proposition. So, it's worth 30 odd bucks to the average beer, staying here versus somewhere else where you layer up parking and layer up a $4.50 coffee, and you're looking at a breakfast inclusive. So it enables us to sort of elevate the entire operation. So I did really want to share that as far as pricing. I mean, I don't know that we as an organization could go much further on a pricing, piece, looking at value, being flexible. We still, print a menu, but it's updated. We've really scaled back the design elements, so it's a pretty easy rinse and repeat. And I know a lot of the restaurants have gone to dailies. But we've re-engineered the menu as well. And I think one of the biggest things for the hotel sector has been the shift in housekeeping. So pre-pandemic, a 3-night conference in Toronto, they would quote differently. They would quote with housekeeping and without. So this trend on sustainability, and as well as the use of interim amenities and going to bulk amenities in the showers, which has a bit of a heebie-jeebie feel, but listen, if you color your hair like I do, man, you got your own shampoo and you're not using one of those little plastic bottles anyway, because you're going to rinse away that 125 bucks. So, but that has been one of the big resets and has enabled, I guess, this industry to save a lot of costs on a daily and ongoing basis. I had a hotelier in here, last week, and they didn't understand that was an opportunity. But if you go online with any of the major brands right now, daily housekeeping is provided after the 3rd night of your stay. Everything's always available, whatever you need. But that is a big, big efficiency. And the truth is, if we had to do daily housekeeping, we would have to limit the number of rooms that we were selling because we wouldn't have the people to clean them.
Yes, exactly. Now, Todd, so we all know that, we're short personnel, and I know you have a new model in your company. So how has your workforce changed over the last 2 years? And how are you managing to provide your exceptional guest services at your restaurants?
It's anybody who has, people who they're responsible for as employees understands that that's a daily, hourly occupation. So, especially now, we definitely, it's fairly well understood what we did at Mallard Cottage is we changed, we started paying a significantly higher wage for servers and cooks, kind of than the industry does around here. For a couple of reasons. I've been at this a long time, and I'm a fairly idealistic guy. So this is something that I wanted to do when we opened the restaurant 10 years ago, but we didn't have the guts to do it at the time because what it would do to us in terms of how we'd have to price and all that stuff. So the pandemic was an opportunity for me to be like, no, I always said I wanted to pay, $20 plus, and I don't. Tipping is an outdated and sexist and racist and you name it. Tipping is a broken thing that shouldn't exist in our industry. It's certainly something that shouldn't base your business on or how you pay your people. So a lot of us do and have, but unfortunately, it's not sustainable. It's gonna die. It should die, and it's going to. So I'm just kind of trying to push that. I'm trying to push it off the cliff in my own little world as quickly as possible. But it's tough, like even inside of our model where, like I said, we pay a decent, more than the living wage for this part of the world. There are still tips available in our restaurant. People still leave tips, and tips are still distributed in the way that, tips get distributed in the restaurants. But sometimes it's more than that. It takes more than money to motivate people, right? Like, and we still have our challenges in maintaining staff. I have a very good core group of people, but I still have them around the edges that are coming and going daily, and going to work at other food service or other things, and it's and we're at the limit of what we can afford to pay them. It's just like, this is, you're doing as good as you can do, like basically working inside of a business like ours. But it's still not enough for some people, because dealing with customers, dealing front facing with people every day is tough. It's a tough business, right? People are not always nice. People are not always easy. It's all of those things. So really what we try to do is, like Judy alluded to earlier, is like, we try to support them in whatever way that we can. I mean, some of that's monetary, some of that is benefits, some of that is, but a lot of it is being there for them and talking to them and supporting them and helping them and being flexible, and all that kind of stuff, which obviously is a cost to the business, right? One of the feathers I put in my hat, or whether it's right or whether it's wrong, I've always said, in the 10 years or 9 years that Mallard has operated, nobody who's ever worked there has ever not gotten a day off that they asked for. It's just something that was just, I never felt it was a spot where it was worth, pissing someone off for a day. We'll figure it out. And it's just something that we've always done, and we still do. It's the things like that, I think, that you have to try to work on. It's the intangible things. It's the general atmosphere of the workplace. It's the perceived treatment, because sometimes people feel like they're getting treated in a way that they're not actually getting treated. So, like that's also a balancing act, because every person is different, especially now after COVID. What one person considers to be good treatment, someone else considers to be bad treatment. And so, you're navigating individuals, right? So it's a challenge. But I guess the short answer after a long one is that we just try to make it a really nice place to be. And that's always been the mantra, even though we didn't do as good a job of it over the years as we are trying to do now. But it's always important to me that our place is as enjoyable for the people that work there as it is for the customers, because we're all there together, and if it's not that, then to me, it's not the type of business that is manageable, because that just makes my job too hard. I already got a lot to do, and having to go around putting out fires with staff all day long is just impossible. So yeah, it's not an easy thing to manage, but I think that we fool ourselves if we think it's just about money. It's not just about money, not at all. There's a lot more to it than that. Money's a big part of it, but there's a lot more to it, and the money is the easy part. Like I say to people all the time, people say, "Well, geez, Todd, when you raised it, how did you find it?" I said, "Well, I don't pay them. The customers pay them. I raised the prices. It's not my money." So like, I haven't got any money. I mean, it's all, I'm just a tube. It comes in, goes out. Like, that's how it is. So, but you have to leave some behind, and, raising prices so people get paid more is part of maintaining a quality staff. But the rest of it is really down to a lot of intangibles that are really hard to even describe, because it comes down to individual people, not just a team,
Thanks, Todd. Now, Mike, Todd mentioned money. Of course, cash flow is king in keeping your business, liquid. And, we just went through 2 years of the pandemic with reduced, revenues, extremely reduced revenues, increased costs, having to take on extra debt. Here we are 2 years later with inflation. So how do you suggest, what's your advice for managing your debt and cash flows during this time?
Yeah, it's a challenging time if you don't understand your business, right? I mean, like you say, cash is king. You can't grow your business if you don't have access to capital. Any business owner that tried to grow using just what's in their bank account realizes that they can't connect their ambitions to reality without maximizing the capital that's available to them. That's why financial institutions are there to support the growth of businesses. But without an understanding of your real-time financial position, how do you make informed decisions without putting your business in jeopardy? So you need access to cash in order to grow, but you need to know your cash flow in order to be able to like I say, make those knowledgeable decisions. And I think about some of the strategies that you guys are talking about here today. I mean, they're rooted in a real understanding of your business, right? I mean, Todd, you touched on it just then about really the experiential piece and how vital that is to the, not just your customer experience, but the employee experience, right? I mean, having that good sense of true north is how you really make the best decisions for the future of your business. Same thing goes with your finances. So like I talked about, having a daily understanding of your margins, your trends, how you compare to industry is key. And also then forecasting effectively the impact of your operations. One strategy with the supply chain issues that we're seeing across the board is a move from this just-in-time inventory, which was always the way most industries went to minimize your input costs, to this just-in-case model. So how do you know if you can make those bulk orders if you don't have a good sense of your true cash flow? You need to understand if you've understood your current financial position and then the impacts of your cash flow of making those bulk purchases, well, now you can with confidence make those investment decisions. Maybe bulk up on that inventory so you have it to be able to have a better margin, right? Spread out over, a wider base. That makes sense, but you can't do that without good data.
Thank you. Judy, of course, you're a planner. You're not looking at next weekend or next month. You're looking at, you're visionary, you plan. So give us some advice on how do we plan for the future, and what do you see in the future? Like, how long do you think this recession will last, and how do we, make our way through it?
Great question. So I think any of us that are operating, true travel businesses, if we're in the travel industry as opposed to the tourism industry, I mean, people in the tourism industry get to sort of, roll up a little bit in October. Then there's those of us who have to make our mortgage payments in Jan, Feb, March, when the numbers are not going to be strong. So the first thing is to really hang on to your cash. And, back to what Michael said about, really understanding your cash flow and what you're going to need to survive. I confess I'm a bit fearful, although I'm very respectful of the decisions that the federal government made early on in the pandemic and providing a lot of support to a lot of businesses. This, for a lot of people, will, and you're starting to see it, you're hearing some people that really haven't understood the changes that have happened around us. So they're actually trying to roll out a 2019 season in 2022 and wondering what the hell happened. So, it's not too late to really, really understand where your money is going. And I tell you, if you have nothing better to do today, it doesn't matter what you have happening today. The first thing that you need to be able to do is focus on your sustainability. So, I think that Jan, Feb, March are going to be tough without question. And, you really need to be managing your money today for the first quarter of 2023. I think we're going to have a strong year for sure. But it's very, very strategic investment, really strategic decisions about your people, about your own income, your own, needs and values. I think that there's another layer. Todd talked about doing the right thing. I think there's a balance there as far as what our roles are within our communities and how we operate, and how we support our communities as a whole, not just our work community, but also our guests. I believe that to be very strong. And, fix your debt. If you've got anything floating out there, or have a, revolving line of credit, well, then, take a look and see where that's going to land. And don't operate with a false sense of reality, but really grab hold of it and really understand your business in the truest sort of a way. And, you're managing inventory, managing people. And you know what, if the shit's about to hit the fan, well, you need to reach out early. If you know that, and you do, when you do that gut check and that things are about to slide, well, then you find those trusted advisors. And whether it's, one of us on the call or somebody in your community that you trust, or your accountant or your lawyer, my dad always used to say, a problem shared is a problem halved. So the sooner you sort of stand up and say, oh my, and when you're starting to see that operating this year in the absence of supports is struggling and choking your business, well, then speak up and find somebody to help you. Call H&L and they'll reach out. I know that there was some discussion a while ago about a mentorship program, but I can tell you, we are all in this together. And I worry about our industry and what, I asked at the AGM, what's the carnage? What have we lost? And I don't think we've figured it out yet. I think that 23 will be the true measure as to what's happened. And, it's in our mutual best interest that we continue to be strong. Rural Newfoundland is very much part of the fabric of our product, and we have to make sure it's strong. So reach out, call a friend.
Great advice. And anybody who's on this call with us, this webinar, if you got any questions, please put them in the Q&A or the chat. So to me, businesses have two options in today's business environment: stay lean and mean, or commit to growth. So in your opinion, Mike, what are the pros and cons of these options? Now I see my businesses, I'm doing both, right? So I'm like committed to growth, but I'm trying to stay lean and mean. And I'm not quite sure if I can be all of that.
Yeah, it's a challenging dance. There's no doubt about that. And it's not, and I'll preface what I'm going to say by saying that entrepreneurship as a source of employment is admirable, right? There's nothing wrong with being content to manage a business. We know that a lot of the reasons why people got into business was for aspirations of growth and greater heights of profitability, and that's what drives our economy. So with that does come challenges as you scale up, and I think we could have a whole host of webinars around scaling up effectively. But it comes back to a lot of the things that we've talked about. You can't scale up effectively without good people.
And that's, Todd, speaking of flexibility, I mean, I know you talked about it with your staff and managing your staff and being open to, obviously letting them have a flexible work environment, but like your business needs to stay flexible as well because things are changing. So how do you incorporate that into Mallard and keeping inflation in mind?
Well, I think I had a conversation with one of my partners like early on in the pandemic, and we were talking about the financials, of one of our businesses. And, his advice to me, and like, again, it's not really where I came from, a couple of years ago, but he's like, it's like, Todd, if 1 and 1 don't equal, 2.5, then, it doesn't matter how good it is. Like, you don't have a business if you can't make it work. Right. So I think that was a bit of a chicken's coming home to roost for me. And I think the way that's manifesting itself inside of, especially at Mallard Cottage, is that, we're not letting this might sound a little harsh, but we're not letting the customers dictate what makes our business successful. Like, you have to price your food accordingly. You don't pricing your food in a way that make customers feel good because they feel like they're not spending too much money. Almost guaranteed you're losing your shirt. You have to figure out a way to give them a value. You have to figure out a way for them to be happy, obviously. But for the average customer, that means they feel like they're getting a deal. So, like I've come around to, and it's literally in the last couple of weeks, and just talking about this in a few other venues the last few weeks, is like, it sounds a bit ridiculous, but I really believe it to be true. And then inside of our business is a little unique because, we're in a quaint fishing village in a natural historic site. It's coming to our place is as much about being where you are as it is about what you do there. Like it's truly an experiential restaurant. There's lots of them around, but I mean, we don't act like a big restaurant chain because, that's not what we are. So, the reality of our situation, and even with inflation and all of those things, the food costs in my business are the least of the costs that I have. So like, I say to people, I don't sell you the food. I'm selling you everything else. I'm selling you this place. I'm selling you this experience. I'm selling you this backyard. I'm selling you a staff member who has a living wage, who can go pay for his apartment. It doesn't rely on you to tip him or her. Like, that's what we're selling. The food just happens to be the thing that got you here, right? And I think that for some customers, that's a challenge. For some customers, they're just like, they don't get that. They don't understand, well, how come this lobster dish is $35? I mean, lobster doesn't cost this much. And I'm like, I think the restaurant industry is guilty of, Brenda, you and I, and me and you, Judy, too, we've had this conversation over the years. Like, our industry is the last bastion of the customer is always right. Right. And we've gotten to the point where we've allowed that to affect our profitability and affect our but like, is the restaurant industry typically, and Brenda knows these numbers better than me, is the restaurant industry, the food industry run at a 1-2% profitability margin because we're all stupid? No, that's not why we run that way, because we allow the customers to keep the prices down because we don't feel good about sticking our head up and being like, no, we can't make money at this number. This is not a feasible number. We're doing it for love. We accept it. It's wrong thinking. So you have to come up with a way to still enjoy what you do and do it for the right reasons, which is the reason I got into it, and is the reason I'm still into it. I certainly wouldn't be persisting in what I'm doing now if it was just for money, because it's way too hard for that. I'm doing it because I'm trying to keep the thing that we built. I'm trying to keep the thing alive because I believe it's important. But I think that, impressing upon the people that come into your business that this is what this takes. This price that you see, that's not made up. That's not us trying to buy a condo in Florida. This is us trying to pay for all of this, because this is very expensive business. And I think we just have to be unapologetic about that. When we did our price changes, last summer, and Judy gave me a poke in the arse there earlier when she was talking about changing the prices for, because she's right, and I haven't done that yet, but it's coming. When we changed the prices, some people were very resistant. People came in and they said, oh, wow, this seems expensive. But the reality of the answer to that is, well, how do you know? How does anybody who walks into your restaurant know if something is expensive or not? Like and I'm not trying to say this to be combative with people, but it's just the reality that people don't understand no more than, like I know as much about brain surgery as the average customer knows about running my restaurant. So, the bottom line is if they're not prepared to pay a price that allows you to pay people what you need to pay them, pay all your overhead, and maybe leave a little bit of money in the bank. So like Judy said, you can survive January, February, and March, then don't buy it. It's not worth it to me to sell that dish if I can't sell it for a price that allows me to do all those things. And that's tough, because that changes fundamentally your business. That's why we're down to 5 days a week and not 7 days a week anymore. It's why we're down to, we're probably at, down 30% in terms of the people that come into the restaurant, but our sales are at or higher where they used to be because we charge more. So we do less people because our market is not as broad as it used to be, because some people are not prepared to pay the money.
Yeah.
That's where it is really, I think, for us.
So, and like, and my last thing I would say is that embracing technology, because from an experience perspective, like I just look at O'Reilly's as an example. We never took reservations for 25 years. Okay. Never. During the pandemic, that's all we had to rely on, because you had to have, this physical distancing and all this. And so we only have so many tables. So we started, to book them. And now we're actually reservation system, and we're actually charging an entertainment fee to make a reservation. So you can embrace the technology, and your restaurant systems that we're all using, POS systems, there's technology in the back of house of that we're not using. Most of us don't use. Like, you can put your inputs into your recipes so you can see, and you can also integrate your schedulings into your POSs so you can see your labor costs on a real time. So I think embracing this technology for me would be my advice to anybody who hasn't, and not to keep your head in the sand, because what's going on around us will kill your business if you don't react to it. And you need to react now. And if you haven't, you need to do it. And if you're still doing it, you need to keep on top of it. And Marika, I see that you made a post there in the chat. Businesses that should all ensure that their cancellation policies meet their needs and serve to protect them. With the car rental crisis, vacancies created by cancellations did not refill the way they would have prior to the pandemic. And I think people's policies about all things, like right now we're putting out catering menus with no prices on them. Here's what we're going to serve. 60 days out, 30 days out, I'll give you a price, right? So like staying flexible, and people understand remember, the customers dealing with inflation as well. They understand things are going up. how can they expect us just to stay status quo? So I think there's an understanding out there. So we're at the end of the session. Anybody who knows people in our industry who weren't able to attend today, just let them know that we will have this session available on YouTube. And I want to thank the panelists today. Michael, thank you very much for your insight from the financial, from the bank's perspective. And of course, my colleagues, Todd and Judy, as always, two people I look to for advice quite often. And, you know, they're very knowledgeable about the industry. And anyway, everyone have a great summer. Put your prices up. and we'll hopefully convene soon with another session. So if anybody's got any ideas of sessions, by all means, you know, Juanita and team, Craig, we're here to help. Thank you.
Take care, be well. I hope everyone has a great summer.